Welcome back to the Stock Car Show. This is a kind of side show that we're doing over the 3 days because today started the BriSCA F2 2025 World Final weekend at the Cowden Beef Race Wall. 3 separate shows after each meeting across the weekend. I might then do a video combining them all into one, I'm not sure yet. As I said, this is the start of the F2 World Final weekend 2025. Obviously today we had around 63 cars booked into race, which isn't too bad on a Friday night. Today was the last chance qualifier, the Overseas Time Trials and the Dennis Midler Senior Memorial Final. So quite a big meeting, all things considered, when you take away the fact that it is also the warm-up pretty much for the World Final tomorrow. The day started with the Overseas Time Trials, which saw 2 sessions with a 10-minute gap in between. The first session began with a group session, so all cars on track doing their laps. H440 Gerrit Hussens, I hope I said that right, was fastest in session 1 with 14.363 seconds, with Wim Peters second 14.399 seconds. Then session 2 was the single lap trials, with the finishing order for the grid being H440 and H124 taking row 3, NI940 and NI998 on row 6, NI918 and NI718 on row 9, H514 and H612 on row 12, and H115 and B96 on row 15. Heat 1 saw Matt Stoneman picking up a black cross, having the win taken away from him, dropping him to 3rd, so Robbie Dawson took the win. The race also saw Gordon Moody and Wim Peters make their way through the pack from the back to finish 6th and 7th. Next was the last chance qualifier of the top 6 qualifying to the main race tomorrow. The race started with a red flag and a complete restart for 3 drivers going into the wall, and one of them being the British champion Tommy Farrell. John Palmer going out with a puncture as well. On the restart was a big rollover 402 Mika Miller down the back straight, almost hitting the infield tyre, landed back on his wheels. The race continued after a caution. It was plain sailing from there, with George McMillan Jr. walking it to book his place in the World Final. Unfortunately for Aidan Grindy, a problem happened down the back straight, so he had to DNF. Also booking a spot in the World Finals, Jessica Smith, Craig Driscoll, John Hogg, Lewis Burgoyne, Kelvin Marshall and Jason McDonald. Number 12, Craig Driscoll, was removed from the consolation semi-final result after not having a transponder, so 387 Jason McDonald now takes the final spot in the World Final. The consolation was next, and that started with 533 hitting the wall hard into turn 1, thankfully all okay. A good race then, with the 3 main red tops of Palmer, Grindy and Wrench coming through, with defending world champion taking the lead with 3 to go and taking the win in the consolation. Next was the Dennis Midler Senior Memorial Final, led around by Dennis Jr. and Lana. A caution came out after 11 laps for a collision on turn 1 and 2. Everyone was okay, thankfully. Gordon Moody, Ewan Miller, John Palmer and Tom Bennett were finding their way through the pack to the front, but it was Ewan Miller who held off Gordon Moody, who was in his backup car, to take the final win, and with Tom Bennett in 3rd. Finally, the Grand National, quite a tame race with I believe 17 cars on track, and it was 17 Paul Reed leading from the off and taking the win. Day 2, obviously today, was the BriSCA F2 World Final at Cowden Beef. We'll get to that in a minute, just quickly starting with some news. I'm sure you've seen it by now, but the 2026 BriSCA F2 Stock Car and National Saloon Stock Car World Final are taking place at Northampton Shareaway on the same weekend. So similar to 2015 at Hennesford, when you had the BriSCA F2 and 1300 World Final together, next year we've got the Saloon Stock Cars and the BriSCA F2s on the same weekend. The poster says the 11th, 12th and 13th of September. Maybe that will change, I'm not too sure, because the European changed day after and we're not too sure when the F1 World Final is yet. I'm going to guess that's a week before at Bradford, but sticking with F2s, the World Final is at Northampton next year, along with the Saloon Stock Cars. I'm very pleased with this. I did want the F2 World at Northampton. I thought Mildenow was going to have the Saloon World Final, but obviously not. Both in the same weekend, which is just awesome. I'm sure that'll be a great weekend and a weekend to remember. But on to that next year, though. We've got a long time to wait. On to this year, then, the 2025 BriSCA F2 World Final. So on to the meeting then. Heat 1 was won by 17 Paul Reed, with the top 12 advancing to the meeting final. A decent heat with a few hits going in here and there, but nothing too spectacular. And after that, it was time for the World Final, with the drivers on the grid, 36 cars, 25 laps. Gordon Moody got away from the front with Chris Burgoyne hot on his bumper, but the red flags came out for a wheel off on the H514 car, so a complete restart was called. On the second restart, Stephen Burgoyne went over the top of Wim Peters and almost over the wall. Thankfully, everyone was okay, but that was the end of their world final hopes. Once the race got going, it was the two Scottish drivers, Gordon Moody and Chris Burgoyne, leading from the front and pulling away, with both drivers exchanging fastest laps. We didn't see it on the stream, but it sounded like there was another coming together between Charlie Ginchard and Graham Fagan, which left the Northern Irish driver stranded on the back straight for the last 4 laps. The two leaders were together going into the final lap, with Burgoyne trying to find his way past, but it was Gordon Moody who held on to take his 5th world title, and I'm sure his favourite one, winning it at home. Burgoyne crossed the line in second and Charlie Ginchard in third, so Gordon will head to Northampton in 12 months' time to defend his gold and take title number 6. Onto the consolation then, and that was won by Matt Stoneman, holding off Mika Miller. An early stoppage, but all was okay, which is the main thing. There was another stoppage involving Ewan Miller and a yellow top. Can't quite remember who that was, I do apologise. Again, all was okay. Some good battles through the pack, with bumpers flying towards the middle of the pack. I believe it was the top 12 going through to the meeting final. Speaking of the meeting final, that was next, and it was the Alan Benson Trophy. Started with a fair few cars hitting the outside wall, one of them being the outgoing champion Luke Wrench. A few laps later, 3 yellow tops would go into turn 3 and 4 hard, making a caution come out. The restart had Mika Miller hitting turn 1 and 2 wall hard, and then a rollover by Josh Weir on the back straight. On the second restart was Archie Grindy, who then almost took off, similar to Stephen Burgoyne in the world final, landing on the NI 940 car, which caused another caution. But again, it was the flying Matt Stoneman who took the win, and would have been interesting to see where he got up to in the world final if he didn't get caught up. Chris Burgoyne once again second, and Kieran Howie in third. Lastly then, there was the Grand National, and due to time restrictions that will be run first thing tomorrow. Onto the racing then, and it started with last night's Grand National. Saw Lewis Burgoyne get tangled, luckily not into a rollover. With 5 to go, it was a 3-car battle between Craig Driscoll, Jessica Smith and Jack Witts, and it would be Jack Witts with a lovely last bend effort who took the win over Driscoll. Heat 1 featured a rollover by Lewis Smith on the exit of turn 1 and 2. It was Chris Burgoyne who finally took a win on World Final weekend after finishing second twice. Heat 2 saw Jessica Smith take the win, a good battle between world champion Gordon Moody and Stephen Burgoyne, but nothing too spectacular in that one. The consolation won by H440, don't really remember much from that race if I'm being honest. The Mac 100 final was next, a busy start to the race, with cars going all over the place, seemed a bit slippy on track. Jack Witts with a lot of smoke from the tyre. Chris Burgoyne charged down Craig Driscoll and pushed him wide into turn 3 and 4 to take the lead, and that's where he would stay to take the final. Stephen Burgoyne would finish third. Final race of the weekend then, the Grand National, not a lot of cars in it, but it was still a good race for second between John Hogg and Craig Wallace, but it was Craig Driscoll who took the flag. Not a very eventful day in terms of F2 racing, but still nonetheless it was a good weekend of racing. It was day 1 of 2025 World Weekend, the overseas meeting where we saw 63 drivers who come from Netherlands or New Zealand to take the track, maybe for the first time ever, and some who have definitely been here before. And for some drivers in particular, they would have been dialing the cars in ready for the World Final tomorrow. Onto the racing then, and the day started as usual with heat number 1. Action aplenty in that one, seeing the superstars such as Wim Peters, Gert-Jan Glock, Rick Wobbers coming through the field. Geordie Pickett led for a while before going out wide into turn 1 and 2, which saw the King's Night winner Roy Platoon take the win in heat 1. Heat 2 saw the likes of Yeli Tesla to Charlie Gridanis and Viber de Vries take to the back. Brilliant battle at the front at some point during the race between H6 and H44, and a couple of white tops, forgotten their numbers, I do apologise, but it was H44 Goose Hoekstra, if I do say these wrong I do apologise, with a decent gap to second, which was H311 at Dijkstra. The third and final heat was next, and another stacked grid with a bunch of drivers of the Dutch and New Zealanders. A great battle between NZ88 and H215 before our car went heavily into turn 3 and 4, H665 and H88. On the restart, Richard Falconer found his way to the top 3 and was trying to find a way past Jeffrey Pickett, and it was a good battle, a tangle to boot, giving Pickett second. Albert Sycamore in H215 took the win. We had consolation number 1 next, and that was quite a calm race until the caution came out for Rebecca Barr. A massive train at the start of the restart causing chaos. Jacob de Vries held it together, and after passing H625 found his way in the lead to take the lead and win. The top 5 making the final. Constellation 2 had another good field of drivers who hadn't qualified for the meeting final. Brilliant race for the win, 3 cars for the lead, and it became 4 at one point between the lower graders H215, NZ88, H210 and H642. But after the brilliant battle, it was NZ88 Jack Myers, who's been flying on the Kingsland Shale, who took the win. Brilliant battle for 5th place, going to the last bend, Joey Sleuth, who made the race just in time from customs qualifying for the final. On to the meeting final then, and it was a massive grid full of talent. A chaotic start saw the New Zealander Jack Mears surge out in front and lap a fair few of the drivers before a caution came out for H79 as he was stuck down on the back straight. On the restart, chaos again as Wim Peters went up the wall. Looks like 197 Jordi Lemons got all out of shape on the back, getting hit everywhere, and Wim had nowhere to go, so he went up the wall. Then on the restart, we had probably the crash of the weekend as H661 Picker went over Tennant and had takeoff similar to Charlie Sauder at Northampton, except not landing it and rolling. All was okay, which is good to see in a very spectacular crash. After yet another 2 stoppages, the race finally got in full flow, with NZ88 leading them off. Batum was charging him down and even putting an earth rail shot, but it wasn't enough to stop Jack Mears winning the final. I believe he's the first New Zealander to win the final on English soil. If someone can let me know if that's true or not, that would be great. Awesome drive from the Kiwi, well done. Second was Roy Batum and third Yeli Tesla. So the top 3 being drivers in the world final. On to the final race of the night then, the Grand National, and a 36 car race took to the track for what was an awesome race. Full of carnage with 75 Jan Bug van Kolsbeek, hopefully I said that right, took the win. An awesome night of racing. And that sets us up perfectly for world final night, the one that they all want to win. The day started with the time trials, which saw Roy Batum fastest and take inside row 3 alongside 152 Gert Jan Glock. Before we get into the race, we got confirmation today that next year's world final is at Bradford on September 26th, so 2 weeks after the F2 and Saloon Weekender at Northampton. No confirmation yet if it's a 2 or 3 day weekender. All we know is that world final day itself is on September 26th at Bradford. A very wet start to the meeting in Heat 1. Joe Booth won a slow and muddy race, holding off a last bender from James Morris after a caution wiped out Joe Booth's half-lap lead. Heat 2 was dry, and after leading for a while, Chris Cowley got passed by Jordi Pickett after getting held up and going into a tyre by a lapped car, who went on to win the race with the track now looking real good on the inside line. Heat 3 started with Austin Moore going for a little ride on H215 but carrying on. Freya Finnegan led for the first half of the race before Mark Whittle took over, as H496 then took over with 5 to go and a caution came out which bunched the field together for a few laps of action. H496 Cross Peach kept his cool and went on to win. That was the heat action then. Next was the 2025 World Final after some track prep. Tom Harris got the jump, and after a little tap from Frank was away. Bit of carnage in turn 1 and 2 with a stoppage saw some drivers out. Unsure why it wasn't a complete restart, but it is what it is. Second restart, Roy Batum had his eyes on Tom and put him into the wall. Both wall riding let Craig Finnegan get to the lead. Ashley England came out of nowhere to take out Craig Finnegan on turn 3 and 4, let Lee Fairhurst and Tom Harris through. Harris led on a restart, and there he would stay, becoming a 6-time world champion and getting 3 in a row. Big congratulations to Tom. Also a little controversial moment, Charlie Sauder was a lapped car, let Matt Newsom pass, then put him into the wall as payback in turn 1 and 2. Tom joins Dave Chisholm, Stuart Smith Sr. and Andy Smith as the only drivers to win 3 in a row. Second was Yele Tesla and third Lee Fairhurst. Constellation 1 was won by Ryan Harrison after passing long-time leader Jack Mears. Constellation 2 was won by Matt Newson, who had some words for Charlie Sauder. He won it on the last lap, passing Craig Finnegan. The Harry Smith Memorial was the final, and that was won by Ryan Harrison for 5 straight Kings Lynn wins. Adam Joyce gave it a go for the lead, but during a stoppage with 2 laps to go, the car didn't start and he pulled into the centre. One Grand National in the meeting won by 418 Nils Tesla after the long-time leader Peter Susan got caught up. And the last race was the Dash for Cash in memory of Paul with a £5,000 prize fund. And it was a stacked grid full of English and overseas. I'm not going to lie, it wasn't as exciting as first thought. Now, that is me watching through a live stream, so I'm sure there would have been stuff missed. Obviously, a small battle between Harris and Harrison would have given us a look at what next year looks like. Wilby Griffin it was though who took the win with Callum Gill second and Danny Wayneman third. That is your lot then for World Final Night 2025. The baton is passed to Bradford in 2026 for what I'm sure will be another fantastic night as Tom looks to go for 4 in a row and goal number 7. World Masters on Sunday. Heat 1 was won by Albert Sikima. Heat 2 going to Nils Tesla with Jack France taking the flag in Heat 3. And finally Jonathan Davison winning Heat 4 with a stellar drive in which I believe is his first win. Constellation 1 was Martin Brookman and Constellation 2 was Peter Susan. The World Masters final was next and what a great race that was with Nils Tesla taking the win for his second Mildenhall final win in 2025. Second was Richard Falconer and third Tom Harris. A very wet Grand National saw Liam Gilbank take the win. On to this week then, and the shootout is back at Bradford with 41 cars booked in. Points are looking interesting with Frank Wayman currently in a position that would see him knocked out and Craig Finnegan needing to find a way past Finn Sargent. With a good day Saturday, Dave Polly should be all but secured a spot in stage 2 with a massive lead over the rest of his group. Along with the shootout, it is the first 2026 World Championship qualifying round, so drivers will be looking to start strong to get themselves onto a semi-final grid for the World Final at Bradford next year. Bradford also features the V8 World Final, which sees Thomas Brighton on pole looking for world title number 2. Saturday is looking to be a great meeting. If you can't make it, it's live streamed on 247 TV, and I will see you next week for the roundup of round 2 of the shootout.